When we look at our document, it's pretty easy to tell where we're at. After all, we have a title right here that says General Description of Business. However, we're familiar with this document, or at least we're getting familiar, and it's still hard to know, even though we can identify the specific section, exactly where within the whole document we are. Now, certainly we could look down at the status bar and see that we're on page 5 of 21. We could even look at the scroll bar on the right and notice that the elevator button is roughly about a quarter of the way down. These all give us a hint. But what's going to happen when our users want to know where they are in the document, or what the document even is? That's when we need to introduce a new concept. It's one of the most common elements to add to a document, other than the actual content itself, and it's called headers and footers. If you're not familiar with the concept, it's pretty simple. Headers are basically lines of text or graphics that run across the tops of pages, while footers do the same at the bottom of pages. Unlike text that is actually part of the document, the main part of the document itself, headers and footers generally live within the top and bottom margins, and we generally create them, and they automatically duplicate across at least 2 or more pages, so we don't have to try to copy and paste and update them individually. Adding a single header or footer to run throughout a document is really not difficult once we learn how to activate the header or footer region. That's exactly what we're going to do here. In the next lesson, we'll go ahead and learn more about advanced techniques like how to make them different on even and odd-numbered pages, and even different in different sections of the document. That is when we get truly powerful with headers and footers. But let's get started with the basics first. There's actually 2 ways to activate headers and footers. We could simply move up to the top part of the document, and we can see that if we look at the ruler, it's the area that is gray, or we could do the same thing for the bottom for a footer, and we could simply double-click. We also can go to the Insert tab, and that probably shouldn't surprise you because we want to insert a header or footer, so the Insert tab makes sense. About 3/4 of the way across on the ribbon, we have a group called Header and Footer, and here we see 3 options. One of those options is for page numbers. We actually can use this option to insert page numbers very quickly and easily by simply saying we want them at the top of the page or the bottom of the page. We can also work with some of the page margin settings in the current position, as well as formatting the numbers. In other words, are they Arabic or Roman numerals, upper or lowercase letters? This is a very quick way if all you want to do is add page numbers. But we don't. We want to do more than that. So we're going to click on the footer option. Like so much else that we see in Office 2010, headers and footers are now very visual. When we click on this option, we get to see a gallery of predefined headers and footers that are created based on our theme, including colors and fonts, and some preconceived pieces of information that people think we probably want to see. Naturally, there's nothing wrong with using these, but we want to learn how to create them from scratch. That way we'll know all of the skills. Then if we want to come back and use some of these, we also know how to customize them. We could choose a blank header and footer from the top of the page, or we can move all the way down to the bottom and just choose Edit Footer. We're going to start with that option. We give it a click, and it doesn't look like much happened, but I'm going to go ahead and scroll down a little bit so we can see the area we're looking for. This little dashed line represents the footer region. Notice it's at the bottom of the page. We also get to see a contextual tab, Header and Footer Tools, Design. From the right-hand side, this is where we can designate the position of the header and footer region itself. Now, what I love about the ribbon, and I've mentioned before, is that it really kind of reveals and consolidates a lot of stuff that's been around for forever. But in the older versions of Office, we actually got the header and footer toolbar, which was fine for basic stuff, but then we ended up having to go into possibly 2 or 3 other dialog boxes to get to all of the features. Now, almost everything is right here, and so we don't have to go anywhere else, and it also reveals or exposes some of the things we want to see. For example, we can see that according to our page setup, our headers and footers are 1/2 inch from the top or bottom of the page. So here's the bottom of our page, and we can see that the footer is 1/2 inch above that. Now, why do I talk about this? Well, because in the older versions of Word, you had to go to File, Page Setup, and then go to the Layout tab at the very end to find the setting. Now it's right here. And maybe more importantly is, you need to make sure that your header and footer regions are smaller than your top and bottom margins. In other words, here's the bottom of the page. Our footer is going to be 1/2 inch up, and we want to make sure that our bottom margin, so our text, is at least probably 3/4 or 1 inch. You can kind of play with the spacing, but your margins always need to be bigger than your header and footer. All right, with that said, what else can we do? Well, I think it's important that if you can't see your headers and footers, you need to check your document view. We cannot see headers and footers in the Web Layout outline, or draft views. So far we're okay. We're working in our normal view and that's all right. Now we need to start talking about our content. What do we want our footers to do for us? Well, footers are supposed to identify the document and also provide a method of telling where you are in the document. So they can contain basically anything that we can put into the body of a document. Likewise, we can format footer content just like everything else. Common things to put in a footer include things like the document title, the author or the company name, page numbers, a created or printed on date if that's important, and even copyright information. Before we add content, one more thing. You should probably show your rulers while you're working in headers and footers, because headers and footers by default have two default tab stops. One at the center that is center aligned, and one near the right margin which is right aligned. Now we can already see one of the problems. That is that because of the way Word templates are built and the fact that we can go in and modify things like margins, sometimes the tabs do not align correctly. In this case, we can see the right aligned tab is not at the right margin. Now these are just tabs, so we can certainly drag them where we want them to go. In this case, we'll drag it over to the right margin. I want to make a recommendation that I'm actually not going to do here. You'll notice from the position group in the contextual tab of the ribbon, there's something called Insert Alignment tab. The Alignment tab resolves the problems with manual tabs if margins are changed. However, alignment tabs don't show up in the ruler, so that's why I'm not going to use them here. I think we need to be able to see them a little bit while we're getting used to this. Normally in a document, I would recommend dragging these default tab stops off and clicking the Insert Alignment tab option. These are very simple. We simply have to designate which alignment they are, left, center, and right, whether we want them aligned relative to the margin or the indent. I usually work with margin. And then if you want tab leaders, you can do that as well. Then you simply click OK. As I said, we're not going to do that. We're just going to click Cancel. But alignment tabs are useful so you never have to come in and adjust your tabs just to make sure they align correctly on the page. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and get some content in here. Remember, we add content just like we do to the rest of the document. It can be static text that we manually type. It can be Word fields that we'll update based on current settings or file properties. And we also can add images and even tables if we wanted to get carried away. Well, we're not going to get carried away. We're going to keep it simple. So let's put maybe our company name on the left, the page number in the middle, and business plan, which is the title of the document, on the right. If you recall, we've discussed before quick parts, and quick parts are perfect for headers and footers. Because they automatically update, we don't have to necessarily worry about them. I like the create it, then forget about it thing, and that's what we want to do with headers and footers. So we can choose quick parts about a third of the way over in the ribbon. Here we can put in auto text, document properties, or fields. We're going to choose document property, and we're going to choose the company name. It really is that simple. Now, it's not that I couldn't have typed the company name. It's not that I plan on changing the company name, but now it's based on the properties. So if we did want to change it, we could change it here, and it would change in our cover page and anywhere else throughout the document by simply changing it in one place. We just press the right arrow button to get out of that field, and now we're going to press Tab to move to our center aligned tab. This is where we want to insert the page number. Remember that we saw this right from our Insert tab, and it basically works the same way, but once we're in the Contextual tab, it's in the left-hand group called Header and Footer, but it's the same entry called Page Number. Top of page, bottom of page, page margins, current position. We actually want the page number to be inserted exactly where our insertion point is, so we're going to choose Current Position. Then we can choose any one of different styles. We'll go ahead and just click on Plain Number. And there it is. Now I know this may not look very exciting, but this is exactly what we want it to be. A simple number that will update automatically. We certainly don't have to go in and renumber our pages. Now I'll press Tab. That moves us over to the right-hand side. And this is where we want to put in the name of the document. So we could type in Business Plan, but instead we're going to go back to our quick parts, Document Properties, and choose Title. You sticking with me? So far so good? Well, we're almost done. But don't forget, headers and footers do not have to be just one line. We're going to add a second line. I'm going to go ahead and do my right arrow to get out of the field, and I'm going to do Shift-Enter because I want this to be considered part of the same paragraph. Now we're going to add in some other information. Dates are often important in documents. If we have sales figures, or in this case a business plan, it would be good to know when it was updated. When was this information current? We could insert the current date and time using the date and time option. That is one option that we certainly have, and that can be found on the upper left-hand side of our ribbon. Let's go ahead and find that right here. This is kind of the traditional way that people insert dates and times into documents. Find the format, check if you want it to update automatically, and close it out. However, we don't just want the date and time, and we certainly don't want the current date and time. We want to tell people when this was last updated, which may or may not be today. So we're going to type some static text. We're going to type updated followed by a colon. Then we're going to insert a field. We go to the fields by using Quick Parts and clicking on the field option. There is a plethora of information here that we could use. And as you scroll through, you will see that there are things, some of my favorites, like file name. That actually tells us what the name of the file is. We can also put in things like the file path. If you ever wondered where all of these documents came from, that's a very common thing to be able to put into a document. As we continue to scroll down, you will see that there really is a lot of information, some of which you may be familiar with and others that you may not. As you work with fields, you'll get familiar with what's available and how they refer to things. Now, we may be looking for something called updated, but actually that's not the name of the field. So let's scroll up just a couple of clicks, and what we see is we do have a save date. And I like that it also gives us a description, the date the document was last saved. So we're presuming if somebody saved it, they made a change to it, and that will work. Then, of course, we can choose the date format that we like. This depends again on your particular location and what is most appropriate for your use. Let's go ahead and choose the medium date, the 4-NOV-10. Depending on which field you choose, you may have some options that you can choose on the right-hand side, but this is all we need to do, so we'll click OK. This again will automatically update, so we don't ever have to touch it. And with that, we pretty much have our footer ready to go. So we've used the contextual tab, used a couple of things from the header and footer group, from the insert group. We've also talked about the position, and we know about close. We'll get to navigation and options in the next lesson. At this point, what we've been able to do is to create a simple footer that's going to help identify our document, who created it, when it was last updated, and also allow people to navigate quickly through the document by referring to